Boker Tov, good morning everybody. Thank you for coming. A pleasure to be with you this morning and filling in today for Rabbi Adler. I believe he'll be back next week. I'm not Rabbi Adler, if anybody was confused. Okay, so we're going to talk this morning. First of all, I have to apologize. I know that it was advertised on the schedule that the topic for today was understanding the Akedah. I'm not going to be talking about that. So if anybody feels that it's a mekach ta'ut and wants to leave right now, they're welcome to. But we're going to talk about something else. I will say one thing about the Akedah, but there's another piece of the parsha that I really want to cover together with you, which is, I've called it here, the courage to argue Avraham's prayer for a doomed city. And this discussion between Avraham and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no less, it's very, very audacious. This is the beginning of Jewish chutzpah. You know, God tells Avraham what he's going to do, and Avraham says, God, you can't do that. You have to do something else. It's a fascinating piece. It's a fascinating discussion in the Torah. And we just think about it. Maybe we're familiar with the story, like so many stories in the Chumash. We know them, we've learned them, we've heard them, we're familiar with them. But if we stop and think about it for a second, we realize just how shocking this is, right? And, one thing, especially if we compare what happens over here about Abraham's interaction with HaKadosh Baruch Hu regarding storm, and Abraham's interaction with HaKadosh Baruch Hu regarding his own son, right, the Akedah, which is, we're not going to talk about, but I said I'll mention a few words. When Hashem gives Avraham the command to go and to kill his son at the Akedah, to go and kill his own son Yitzchak, this is an ordeal not just for Avraham on a personal level. It's an ordeal for him. It's going against everything that he's brought to the world. He is the one who's gone and he's showing, he's taught the world the evils of child sacrifice. And now God says, go and sacrifice your son, right? How am I going to go and how am I going to look people in the face? All these people that I've come and I've converted to, before Judaism as we know it, but all these people that I've brought, as the Gemara says, Tachat Kanfei Shechina, and I've convinced them and I've taught them values and I've taught them morals and I've taught them what God is and what God says in the world, and you're telling me to do the exact opposite of that. It's going against, it's uprooting everything that I've done for you, God. Right? So it's the opposite of justice, we would think. Not only that, Avraham has received promises. Hashem has promised him, that you're going to become a great nation through Yitzchak, through the son that I'm now telling you to go and to kill. So he has all the reasons in the world. If there's ever a place that we would have expected Avraham to come and argue with God, it's the Akedah. God says to him, go and kill your son. We'd expect Avraham to say, that doesn't make sense. Maybe I've seen it's not the traditional commentaries. There's a more modern interpretation. There are those that say that the ordeal that Avraham should have come and he should have argued against God about the Akedah. I don't believe that's a correct reading of the text. That's certainly not the way that our sages and our commentators learnt it. But it's strange. Why not? Especially when you consider and you contrast that against the piece that we're going to study now about storm. If there's ever a case that I would have expected Avraham not to argue with God, it's about Sodom. These are the people that are the absolute symbol of wickedness, of evil in the world. They go against everything that Avraham has taught, against everything that he is trying to establish. God comes to Avraham and he says, I'm going to destroy Sodom. These people are so evil and they're so wicked and they go against everything that I want the world to be, and they are the opposite of what humanity should be. I'm going to destroy them. Right? So if God would come and tell me, and he hasn't spoken to me recently, but if he would come and tell me, I'd say, great, go ahead. That's what we want. That's what we expect. And everyone says, no, you can't do that. Where's the justice? Where's the morality? But when it comes to his own son, when it comes to exactly the purpose of what I'm here for, so go on. Well, you've lost your voice. Now you're silent. What's going on? So that's an interesting thing to think about, and I'll leave you to think about that, and maybe we'll come back to it at the end if we have time. But that is an interesting question. But let's dive a little bit deeper into this whole story and this whole episode of the destruction of Sodom, of the discussion, the argument. What I want to do is go through the psukim. You've got 2 pages in front of you. One is double-sided, one is not. Don't worry. There's a lot of text on the pages. I know we're not going to read everything inside. But we're going to go through the psukim, And let's go through the psukim with a little bit of a critical eye. Let's look for questions. Let's look for things that jump out at us as we read the text. Maybe things that don't make sense. Maybe things I'd expect to be a little bit different, or any questions that are raised. And we'll go through them, and we'll go through the text. It's not a very long piece, and after that we'll look at what some of the commentators have to say and try and answer the questions and try and tie some of the things together. We'll see there are some very, very important lessons that we can learn from this whole episode as well. So just to put it into context, okay, we've just had the Malachim, the three, right, at first they don't know that they're Malachim, but they discover they've come to visit Avraham and Sarah in their tent, right? They are told, they're given the prophecy that they're going to have a child, and that storm, now we are told that storm is going to be destroyed. Immediately after this, right, the whole episode takes place, and storm is destroyed, and Lot and his family run away, etc. So this is just after the angels have come to visit. So the text that we're reading now begins. V'yakumu misham anashim, right? Anashim over here is the people, so referring to the angels as well. V'yashkifu al pnei storm, v'Avraham holech imam leshalcham. They get up, they're looking over at Sodom, and Avraham goes to escort them out. V'Hashem amar. And now Hashem is going to speak, and he's going to speak directly to Abraham. Begins as follows. Hamechaseh ani me'Avraham asher ani oseh. Can I conceal, can I hide from Abraham that which I am about to do? Now this is the introduction to this whole dialogue. And this is a very, very interesting introduction. We don't find this in other places. Normally, there's a prophecy, there's a nevuah, Hashem has something to say. He says it too. We don't find at the beginning of Sefer Yechezkel that God says, "Hamechaseh ani me'Yechezkel asher ani oseh." We don't find the beginning of Sefer Yirmiyahu. Hashem says, am I going to tell Yirmiyahu? Am I going to tell Moshe what I'm doing? Am I going to tell? Hashem says, am I going to tell Avraham what I'm about to do? This is the opening. This says Darsheni. Okay. And continues, Avraham gadol v'atzum v'nivrchu bo kol goyei ha'aretz. Avraham is becoming a great nation, right? All the nations of the world we blessed through him. Ki yedativ leman asher yatzavet banav et beito achalav v'shamru derech Hashem lasot tzedakah u'mishpat. I know he is going to he's going to command his children and his descendants after him to continue in the way of Hashem, to do tzedakah and mishpat, leman avi Hashem al Avraham et asher diber alav. Okay, so that's the introduction, that's the opening, and perhaps already here the Torah is setting us up for a contrast between exactly what Avraham is and what Sodom are. This is the exact opposite, this idea of tzedakah u'mishpat. That is Avraham Avinu, that is what he brings to the world. Storm is the exact opposite of tzedakah u'mishpat. By the way, in Storm, they had mishpat. They had judgment. They had a very, very sophisticated and advanced legal system. But the problem is, if you have mishpat without tzedakah, all the other way around, then things fall apart. And that is, but it's tzedakah u'mishpat together. That is Avraham, and that is what he brings to the world. Now, Vayomer Hashem, Za'akat Sodom v'Amorah ki rabah v'chatatam ki kavda me'od. Hashem says this cry that is coming from Sodom and Amorah is great. Their sin is very, very heavy. Eldana v'el'ea ketzakata ba'elai asu kala v'imlo eda'a. I'm going to go down. It's all speaking metaphorically, of course. I'm going to see if they're worthy of, if they can be redeemed, essentially. So now the people leave, the Malachim are gone, and now it's just Avraham face to face with God. Okay, so we've had the introduction, we've been told what's going to happen. Hashem has announced to us and has announced to Avraham in the Torah that he's going to destroy the cities of Sodom. So this is where things start to get very, very interesting, right? Again, what do we expect Avraham to do in such a situation? We expect him to say, Hashem, Yeshakach. That's great. We're going to get Yitamu Chatayim min haaretz. We're going to get rid of evil. We're going to get justice. Tzedek u'mishpat. That's all we do. Vayigash Avraham. Very, very interesting that word. Vayigash Avraham. It means in the literal translation is Avraham approached. But Rashi tells us, now I've brought for you some of Rashi. I didn't bring all of Rashi on the Psukim because then it would have just been too long. But what does that word Vayigash mean? Where do we find that word Vayigash? Vayigash alav Yehuda, right? Rashi tells us in a number of places that there are three separate meanings of the word Vayigash. One of the meanings is tefillah. One of the meanings is milchama, going out to war, going out to battle. Now, I said this is shocking. Just think about the Vayigash Avraham. Avraham approaches for war to go out to milchama against Hashem. Vayomar, ha'af tispeh tzadik im rasha. Okay, I want you to look closely here at the word, the argument. One of the things we need to come back and we need to focus on, and we have to understand what exactly is the argument that Avraham is making. What is he requesting from God? So here he says, ha'af tispeh tzadik im rasha. Are you going to kill? Are you going to destroy even a tzaddik with rasha? In other words, what's the claim at this point? What's Avraham saying? There are tzaddikim, right? So there are tzaddikim alongside the rashaim, meaning I'm not questioning the fact that the people of Sodom are evil. There are lots of rashaim that are there, but together with them, presumably there are tzaddikim. And that's, again, if we think about the story in our minds, we're going to see the whole thing. Maybe there's 50, maybe there's 45, there's 40, etc. We'll see it all now in the verses. But essentially, what is Avraham saying? It sounds like there are wicked people, but there are good people. It can't be that you're going to kill the good people alongside the wicked people. All right, that's what it sounds like. Meaning collateral damage, whatever. That would not be fair. So what about if I ask you just at this point, what about the Rishaim, the evil people of Sodom? What is Abraham's approach over here? Does he have a problem? Is he right going to bat for them? No, seemingly not. Meaning that's what it sounds like. You can destroy Sodom, you can kill all the wicked people. Just like Noach had a teva, whatever. Maybe there's going to be a teva for the tzaddikim to survive. Okay, that's how it sounds. Now let's see the next pasuk. Says Avraham, continues, Ulai yesh 50 tzaddikim betoch ha'ir. Maybe there are 50 righteous people within the city. Ha'af tispeh velo tisa lemakom leman 50 tzaddikim asher b'kirba. It's very interesting. Would it be possible, Ribono Shel Olam, would you make them perish? Who? Of tispeh velo tzala? Huh? Just the 50. Just the 50. What does the pasuk say? What does it mean? Is it possible you would not make them perish and you would not forgive? Hamakom. What does hamakom mean? That's the place. That's everyone. That's what it's telling. Again. And as a result of the fact that there are 50 tzaddikim in the city, you're not going to forgive the entire place because of the 50 tzaddikim that are inside. In other words, at this point, when I read this pasuk, it doesn't sound like Avraham is arguing for the tzaddikim. He's arguing for something much more radical. He's saying, however many righteous there are, as a result of the fact of them, don't destroy the rest of them. And again, we have to ask ourselves, why? What are you asking? What is it? Again, the question that's always the entire time has to be in the back of our minds. Avraham knows who he's talking to. Avraham knows that he's talking to God. What is it that Avraham thinks that he knows better, or that God expects him to know better than God himself? Yeah.
He already in Mechacha, we saw that he said, he knows that his generation is going to be saved, but he's worried about the future. He doesn't know what's going to happen to his children. Is he worried here that maybe later on, when his children sin, and they're going to be destroyed like Sodom, and that's why he's trying to do this to bargain?
Interesting. Okay, I hadn't thought about that. You're saying, is it possible that the people of Sodom it's not really that he's interested in them for their own sake, so to speak, but he's laying the groundwork for us to. Okay, maybe that's an interesting. It's a very creative suggestion. I don't know. We can come back to that maybe. In any event, he continues. And then it says, Chalila lecha me'asot kadavar zeh. Chalila lecha, right? That expression, Rashi says, is from the language of Chulin. Chas v'chalila. To say to God, Chas v'chalila, again, it's shocking when you read these psukim. But he says, me'asot kadavar zeh, la'amit tzadik im rasha. What's the problem now? How can it be that you can kill the righteous along with the wicked? In other words, I don't mind that you kill the wicked. That's fine, but don't kill the righteous along with him. So the whole thing, it's 3 psukim, very, very simple and very straightforward at first glance. When we look inside and we analyze a little bit deeper, it's not clear what the argument is. It's almost not coherent. At the beginning, you're saying, Haftis bet tzadikim rasha. It's not fair, save the righteous. And then you say, Haftis bet v'lo tisal hamakom. You're saying, save everybody. If they are righteous, everybody has to survive. And then you're saying, tzadikim rasha. You can't kill the righteous, but you can kill the wicked. So it's not exactly clear. And again, the question which we ask in the first place is, of all the people in the world to be praying for Avraham, why do you care? Why are you praying about the people of Sodom? Okay, we're going to come back and answer all these questions, but that's as we go. Vayaka tzadik rasha. Yeah, he says it again. The problem is that you are equating the tzaddik and the rasha together. Chalila lecha. Hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. Could it be that the judge of all the earth is not going to fulfill mishpat? And of course we know that means mishpat together with tzedakah. Okay, so that's the opening monologue. Now Hashem answers back. Vayomer Hashem im imtza b'Sodom 50 tzadikim betoch ha'ir v'nasati lakol hamakom ba'avuram. So Hashem says, okay, if I find 50 tzadikim within the city, then I will save chol hamakom. In other words, so it sounds like, at least from the answer, we understand the main claim, the main argument here. It's not just about the tzaddikim saving, it's about saving everybody. Okay, we'll see. Also notice that there's something interesting about that expression. I've underlined it for you because it appears twice. It appears once in Avraham's argument, it appears once in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response as well. Where he says, 50 tzaddikim b'toch ha'ir. What is the significance of the fact that it says 50 tzadikim betoch ha'ir, 50 tzadikim inside the city? Obviously inside the city. We're not talking about anywhere else. So why couldn't it have just said 50 tzadikim? There seems to be something there. There seems to be something in that repetition and something in that phrase. We'll come back to it later. Okay. Vayan Avraham vayomer. Hinei na ho'arti ledaber el Adonai v'anochi afar va'efer. Okay. For whatever reason, right, Avraham at this point seems to realize that this is a little bit of chutzpah. Okay, it's almost like he's taking permission. We would have expected this at the beginning, but now Avraham answers back and he says, "Okay, look, let me b'mechila mikvod torato." Essentially, that's what he's saying. He's saying, right, please let me speak. He's taking apology. He says, "Anochi afar va'efer." I'm dust and ashes. Why afar va'efer? Why that here? What? Ulai yachzon 50 tzadikim chamisha. So he says, so God, you said there are not 50 tzaddikim. Okay, understand also why the number 50? Of all numbers, you could have said 100, you could have said 200, you could have said 20. Why did you start with 50? But let's say 50. Let's say there are 5 less than 50. Okay, 45. Again, why 45? That's also a very interesting way of phrasing it. Because of those 5, are you going to destroy what 5? Those 5 that don't exist. Because of those 5, you're going to destroy the city. So Hashem says, okay, I won't if I find 45, won't destroy it. And so it's implied that there are not 45. It doesn't say it explicitly. Continue in Pasuk Kaftet. Avraham continues. Says, okay, there aren't 45. Maybe there are 40. God says, okay, I won't do it if there's 40. Okay, what do we expect next? We've gone from 50 to 45 to 40. What do we expect coming next? 35. Okay. This is a very, very mathematical audience. So he says, Vayomer al na yichar l'Adonai, v'daber olai matzun sham 30. He says, what about 30? So I don't understand. You went from 50 to 45 to 40. So if you're going down in increments of all of a sudden now 30. Numbers seem very strange, very random. And again, he asks for this, takes permission to speak. There's not 30, maybe there's 20. God says, okay, I won't destroy for 20. So the answer for all of them... So the truth is that for all of them, the answer is implied. Meaning, even if we go back to the 50, right, in Pasuk Kavav, all it says is, if there are such a number, then I won't destroy it. So it's interesting as well. It doesn't anywhere in the Psukim say explicitly that God turns back and says, there are not 50 tzaddikim, there are not 30 tzaddikim. That's implied, but it doesn't say it anywhere explicitly. So he says, last chance, last try, last attempt. Maybe there are 10. Okay, so the question to ask here is, Avraham, you've done so well until now, and you've tried so hard. Why do you stop at 10? Why not carry on down to 5? Why not carry on down to that? What's right? Why stop?
Because God left.
Huh?
God left.
Afterwards. But he could have said, okay, you said not 10, maybe 5. Okay, so we'll see that as well. God says, okay, that's it, Avraham, I've had enough, I'm going. God goes back to his place, whatever that means. Avraham goes back to his place, and that's it. That's the end of the story. Okay. And then we know the continuation is that ultimately that storm is going to be destroyed. Okay, so there are a lot of questions here. There are a lot of unanswered things, a lot of very, very cryptic things going on in this, as I say, very, very shocking and very, very dramatic encounter. Let's unpack some of the questions and some of the things. Again, the main question, the main thing that really strikes for me, and we spoke about it, but when you look at these psukim, and the question is, you have here an argument, you have a claim, what is it that Avraham is asking for? What is the argument about? Is it about the fact that he says, maybe there are tzaddikim, okay, but the question is, maybe there are tzaddikim, and therefore what? Is it maybe there are tzaddikim, and therefore those tzaddikim should be saved, and everybody else can be destroyed? Maybe I'm saying, maybe there are tzaddikim, and therefore the entire place deserves to be rescued. And if so, if that's the case, why? Why do the other people deserve it? Right? At the end of the day, why are these numbers the numbers that they are? Why does Avraham stop when he stops? Essentially, we can ask another question. Is Avraham satisfied with the answer that he receives at the end? If the whole argument is, maybe there are tzaddikim, and I don't want the tzaddikim to be killed because that is indiscriminate justice, and God says, well, there are not tzaddikim, so Avraham says, okay, so then let it be destroyed. If it's something more than that, then maybe Avraham is not so satisfied. Again, maybe there are less than 10 tzaddikim. If the question is about those tzaddikim, if there are less than 10, what if there are 5 tzaddikim in the city? We don't know. The psukim just ended the fact that there are 10, and the whole argument, there are not 10, and the whole argument stops. So maybe there are 5, maybe there are 4, maybe there are 3. What? There'd be no minyan. Okay, so we're going to get into that. But are those individuals going to be saved? Now, the truth is we know that there are some individuals in the city of Storm who enter the category of tzaddikim for these purposes, who are saved, right? That is Lot and his family. And they are ultimately saved, or some of them. So let's see. Let's have a look at Rashi. Some of Rashi, I haven't brought everything, but some of the psukim of Rashi where he explains some of these ideas, and we'll look at some ideas from some of the other Mefarshim that will help us to unpack. Okay, so remember the beginning, before we got into the whole argument, the introduction, which was very, very strange. The introduction, which was, Hashem Amar, HaMechaseh ani me'Avraham asher ani oseh. Should I hide from Avraham? It's like, God is like thinking to himself, like, should I tell him or should I not tell him? Right? Obviously, it doesn't mean that. But what does it mean? What are these psukim trying to tell us? So Rashi says, HaMechaseh ani b'tmiyah. It's like a rhetorical question. Is it possible, could I possibly not tell Avraham what I'm doing? Which again, we don't find by any other Navi that Hashem says, could I not give him this nevuah? Asher ani oseh b'stom. He says, lo yafer li, asher ani oseh b'stom, lo yafer li la'asot davar zeh shelo mida'ato. It's not nice for God to do this without letting Avraham know. Ani natati lo ha'aretz hazot. I have given him this land as an inheritance. V'chamisha klachin halalu shelo hen. Okay, so this is the first thing that's going to help us just unpack the pshat of the story a little bit. Rashi tells us, right, we talk about Storm, maybe Storm and Amorah. There were actually 5 cities. So once I understand there are 5 cities, things start to make sense. I say, aha. So now I understand where the number 50 comes from. Because 50 means there are 5 cities and each one has a minyan, right? 5 times 10, that's 50. And Rashi says that. Etc. Karati oto Avraham. But more than that, why do I have to tell him? I've called him Avraham, which means Av Hamon Goyim. He's going to be the father of many nations. Ve'ashmidet habanim v'lo odia la'av shu avai. He is the father, at least the spiritual father of many nations on earth. I'm going to destroy these nations and not let him know. Okay, so that wouldn't make sense. Have a look. We'll come back to Rashi in a moment, but I want to just explain this point. Have a look on the 3rd page. You have your source number 7 on your hand. That is the Khatam Sofer. This is a piece that's printed in the introduction to the Shut of the Khatam Sofer. He says something here tremendous, something remarkable. And essentially, the Khatam Sofer answers for us the question of why it says, "Hamechaseh ani me'Avraham asher ani oseh." What he says is the following. I'll say the general idea and then we'll read it inside. Khatam Sofer says that it doesn't say by any other prophet that God says, should I tell them, so to speak? Because once a prophet reaches a level, reaches a spiritual level, reaches a level of nevuah, so it makes sense and it's fitting that he's going to receive that prophecy of Hashem. But he says that Avraham, in fact, did not reach that spiritual level. He says Avraham didn't have time to reach that level himself, to work on his own, to invest in his own growth, so to speak, because he was so busy going out and giving and helping the rest of the world. And therefore he says something startling. Says the Khatam Sofer, "Hamechaseh ani me'Avraham" means, actually, I don't need to tell Avraham. I don't need to. He's not on that. He's not on that level in terms of prophecy. But nonetheless, I'm going to tell him, because the reason he's not on that level, the reason he's given up of his own growth is because of what he's giving to others, because of what he's investing in my children, in his children. Okay, and it's something remarkable, and it's something for us to think about when we talk about the balance between one's own growth and giving to others. Right, there's something very, very fundamental to think about here. But says the Khatam Sofer, source number 7. He says, Avraham Avinu alav hashalom be'emet lo hagi'a madregat nevuah kazo. Avraham was not on this high level of nevuah. כי לא היה לו פנאי להתבודד עצמו במחשבתו ולקשר נפשו במדרגת נבואה כזו. The Rambam in Shmoneh Prakim, his introduction to Masechet Avot, has 8 chapters, and therefore it's called Shmoneh Prakim. He talks there about what is necessary, how one becomes a Navi, right? What one needs to, what the levels intellectually, spiritually, the heights that one needs to reach. It's not so easy. But he says Khatam Sofer, Avraham did not reach this level. לא היה לו פנאי להתבודד, to be by himself with his thoughts and to connect himself to this this level. לפי שהיה מוטרד תמיד בלימוד התלמידים, all the time he was busy teaching. והיה דעתו מעורב בין הברואות להכניסם תחת כנפי השכינה. He was involved in bringing other people closer to God, rather than engaging in bringing himself to ever higher levels. ואילו היו תלמידים האלו במעלה הנכונה, לא היה לימודו אותם מניעת התבודדות המחשבה. So obviously if those he was teaching were on a higher level, then he would have reached that level himself. אך הם בתחילת לימודם היו במדרגה פחותה עד שהיה צריך להכניסם לאט לאט. But they were on a lower level, so he had to speak to them where they were. ועל שנועע נפשו תמיד להתעסק עם קצרי דעת כאלו, לא נשאר לו פנאי להתבודד מחשבותיו לנבואה כזו. Amazing. Says the Khatam Sofer, and he continues, כי אין חיסרון בשלמות נפשו, וכל מיעוט הכנתו על הנבואה הוא רק על ידי שהוא מטריד עצמו לכבודי. In other words, why did Avraham not reach the greatest spiritual levels, not reach the greatest heights of prophecy? Not because he was watching the football, but because he was involved, because he cared about the honor of Hashem. And he was trying to spread that into the world. And therefore, he sacrificed for himself. And has the paradox. Because he sacrificed for himself in that way, God says, I'm going to bring him up, right, so to speak. ולמעני משליך נפשו מנגד וגוזר ממנה מעלת הנבואה. He loses out this level. Right? אם כן לא ייתכן שצדיק כזה יפסיד על ידי עבודתו בעבודתו אותי. If all of this was done because of his service, because of his great love for me, it doesn't make sense that he's therefore going to lose out on it. And therefore that's the meaning of Hamechaseh ani me'Avraham. Amazing. Says the Khatam Sofer, when Hashem says, is it conceivable that I will not tell Avraham this prophecy? He says what the Torah is implying is, yes, it's conceivable that I won't tell him because he's not on that level, because he sacrificed his own spiritual growth in order for others. And that again, that ties into the whole story of Storm, and that again ties into the whole story of what is taking place here. Let's go back to Rashi. So Rashi continues, and again, I'm skipping. There is more commentary on Rashi in this psukim, which you don't have in front of you, but you're welcome to go and look at it after the shir. So he says, maybe there are 50 tzadikim. We asked the question, why 50? Right? Asara tzadikim nachol krach v'krach, ki chamisha makomot yesh. There are 5 places, and in each one of these 5, I'm questioning, maybe there are 10 tzadikim in each. Chalila lach. V'im tomar lo yatzilu tzadikim et al-sha'im. Lama tamid tzadikim. Sorry?
We still these people are Jewish.
They're not Jewish. There's no such thing at this point.
Right. So what is the whole idea about minion?
No, so it's not minyan in the halachic sense of if there's a minyan then they can get together and they can say Baruch Hu and Kedusha, right? That's not what we mean. But why a minyan? We assume, right, a minyan is 10 people that's learned out from terms of an eidah, that is a community, that is a certain minimal unit that we have that we call 10 people. Okay? So he says again, remember the question we asked. Are we praying? Who is Avraham praying for? Is he praying for the tzaddikim? Is he praying for everybody? So here Rashi says, Chalil alach, im tomar lo yatzilu et tzaddikim et ha'oshaim, lama tamit tzaddikim. So that sounds like there's a two-tiered argument here. It sounds like Rashi is saying, at first, Avraham is saying, right, you should save everybody. In other words, the tzaddikim, in the merit of the tzaddikim, you should save the entire city. And if that's not going to work, so I'll say at least save the tzaddikim. Okay. The problem with that interpretation doesn't quite fit into the psukim. Because how does it start? It starts off the first pasuk Kaf Gimel. It says, Avraham says, "Ha'af tispet tzaddikim rasha." So you could say that's maybe sort of the opening for the whole thing, and then he says his real argument is maybe since there's tzaddik with rasha, you should save everybody. And then saying if you're not going to save everybody, so then I'll say chalil alach in pasuk kavei la'amit tzaddikim rasha. Okay, that's how Rashi seems to understand it. And then he says, continues Rashi at Hatashchit b'chamisha halo hen tish'a l'chol krach. We ask, why all of a sudden do we get to 45? 45 is the number which is the anomaly here, right? Understand, if you would say 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, okay, makes sense. But why 45? And then why not, if it's 45, why not 35, right? So he says, why 45? Halo hen tish'a l'chol krach. You would have 9 in each city. Ve'ata tzadiko shel olam titztaref imahem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you together with them, that makes 10. Okay. He continues, then he says, so then, now he changes tactics. In other words, the way Rashi understands is like this. When I'm asking for 50, I'm asking for all 5 cities to be saved. When I'm asking for 45, I'm asking for all 5 cities to be saved. I'm saying maybe there's 9 in each city, 9 together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kivyachol, right, that makes 10. But then he says, even that's not enough. So then he gets to 40. What are you saying when you get to 40? So he says, he's saying, okay, I understand at this point that at least one of the cities is going to be wiped out. But maybe there are 10 tzaddikim in 4 of the cities. Maybe there are 10 tzaddikim in 3 of the cities. Maybe there are 10 in 2 of the cities. Okay. So at this point, I'm, asking for each one of those. At least one of those cities should be saved. And then he says, we end off with 10. He says, less than 10 he does not ask for. Amal, dol amabul ayu shmone, Noach ubanav unshehem lo etzilu adoram. He says, how do I know that I don't go below 10? Because in the times of Noach, right, there was Noach and his wife and 3 sons and their wives. That's 8 people. 8 people couldn't save the world. And he said, we've already asked for 9 when we asked for 45. Okay, so you could ask the question, well, why don't you ask for 9 by itself? 45 was 9 in each of the cities, maybe in one of the cities. That's a question. But nonetheless, he says, we know from Noach that we don't need, that below that there's no hope. Again, here it sounds like, Noach ubanav, that's 8 people that saved the entire place. It sounds like here it's not just about saving. It's not just about saving the tzaddikim, but it's about saving everybody. Okay, and the question again is why. So have a look that the Divrei David, brought here on source number 3. This is the Taz. You're familiar with the Taz, is one of the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. He also wrote with different works, and one of them is called the Divrei David, which is a commentary on Rashi's commentary. Therefore, it is a super commentary. I love that word. But it is a commentary on the commentary, and therefore the Divrei David is one of the explanations on Rashi. In fact, there are many commentaries that are written on Rashi's commentary. But this is what the Divrei David says. Again, he's addressing this point that we've been asking the entire time. He says, Kasher. So the obvious question is, you started off asking why, how is it just that you're going to kill, that the righteous will die along with the wicked? Obviously the Rashaim are going to die. And then he says, right? Right, again, if you look in the Psukim, so what we said, Pasuk Kaf Gimel was, Tzadav tispeh tzadikim rasha. Can the righteous perish with the wicked? And then in Pasuk Kaf Dalet it says, Ha'af tispeh v'lo tisal lemakom. Will the entire place perish? Bavulam, the hainu latzil gamal shaim. In other words, I'm implying that the wicked should also be saved. So he says, Davar ze haya shayach, im hayta tfilato harishona nishmat, haya mitpalel achar kach od b'derech halavuta. In other words, if my first prayer was accepted, so then I would ask for more. Ma she'en ken b'chad tfilah, איך יתפלל תחילה דבר קטן, ואחר כך על דבר גדול. He says, but the way, it's not logical, the order, the sequence here. You're saying you're asking for the small thing, and then you're asking for something more, right? Normally you would say, I'm asking for something, you ask somebody for, you have a request that you make, and you say, can I have something? And you say, okay, if you won't give me that, so at least give me, something less. So he's saying, Ribono Shel Olam, at least save, first of all, I'm saying save, save the righteous. And you know what? If that's not enough for you to save the righteous, well then actually you should save everybody. The order here is wrong. It's hafuch al hafuch. So therefore says the Taz, like the Salken Pelashashi Da'achikama. Here's how he explains what Rashi said. Da'min al-ha'oi shelo tetzpeh tzadikim al-rasha, zeh shirat adin, ve'en tzarich tfilah. In other words, what he's saying, the first point is obvious. So, Ribono Shel Olam, obviously, you're not going to make the righteous perish along with the wicked. That's clear. I don't even need to say anything. I don't need to question. Ein tzarich tfilah. Rak hatfilah shtatzil lechol hamakom Avraham. But my tfilah goes much deeper. My tfilah is obviously you won't kill just the tzaddikim, but allow those tzaddikim to save, in their merit, save the entire place. V'im lo to'er tfilati. And then he says, because then he goes back, he says, so my first request is actually save the entire place. If that's not going to work, so then we go back to the basic, which is what doesn't need to be stated, which is at least save the tzaddikim. As we see going on, that doesn't happen either, because those tzaddikim do not exist. Rav Hirsch, I think, opens up this entire parasha for us in a new light. And he focuses on specifically that phrase, which I mentioned before, Chamishim tzadikim b'toch ha'er. This is going to help us understand really what Avraham's tefillah is all about. Have a look, source number 6. And again, I haven't brought the entire passage. It's a very, very long piece, but I brought a lot of it. We'll read through it because it's really fundamental. Says Rav Hirsch as follows. He says, Lachar she'Hashem hodi'a lo et atzato, harei Avraham choter b'chol nafsho lematzot et omek adin, ach she'ela achat mekasemet belibo. Says once Hashem tells Avraham about this whole plan to destroy these 5 cities, there's one thing that's gnawing at Avraham. He says, "Lo shumati le'eze safek bedavar, im omnam yinaslu hatzadikim me'ashoah shtavo al shaim." He says there is no, as we just saw, there is no question in Avraham's mind. Avraham does not suspect God, so to speak, that the righteous are unjustly going to perish. That's not the question. That's why when he says chalila, it's chulin, it doesn't mean, Hashem, God forbid, don't do it. It means, I know you won't do it, obviously. בוודאי, גם אם נגזר להגמור על סדום ובנותיה, הצדיקים שבקרבה ימלא את ימרתו. Avraham says, I know that if Sodom is going to be destroyed, Sodom will be destroyed, the righteous amongst it, they will escape. There's no question, obviously. אפילו אחד מלבבות, even if it's 1 out of thousands. Ulam yodeh Avraham et nefesh hatzadik. He says, but Avraham, and this ties in with the whole introduction and tells us why. Avraham knows what it means to be a tzaddik. Avraham margish ech haya chashu bimkomo shel hayachid. The question that Avraham asks himself, and this is why God tells Avraham about this, is Avraham says, if I was there, if I was the individual, if I was the one in storm, how would I feel and what would I think about what's going on? If I was the one individual who's going to survive from that destruction, Avraham choshev ki ilu haya ole begoralo amar lagur bestorm. Had it been that he was living in storm, lo haya mechaseh kol ma'amatz milishkod lelo heref al takanot bnei iro ve'artzo shesatu me'aderech. What would Avraham do if he was in storm? He would open up his tent on all 4 sides and he would bring people in and he would talk to them and he would try and convince them. He would do what Noach failed to do and he would do what Lot failed to do. But he would be something else. לא היה מתייאש מן התקווה גם על פתחו של אבדום. He would never despair, he wouldn't give up hope for those people. והיה סובל ייסורי מוות באובדן כל נפש, אשר להצלתה חטא ולהצלחתה ציפה וכיוון. Ultimately, if he failed in that mission, but he would mourn just as much, and he would grieve for all those who he was not able to save. Skip to the second paragraph. אין אברהם אומר, אולי יש 50 צדיקים בעיר, אלא בתוך העיר. You know what it means when it doesn't say there are 50 tzadikim of the city, at the city. It's בתוך העיר, within the city. By the way, the Meshech Chochmah here says, he says, what does it mean 50 tzadikim בתוך העיר? He's saying, it doesn't have to be tzadikim gmurim. It doesn't have to be the tzadikei ador. It means within the city, relative to the wickedness of storm, surely there's 50 people that are righteous to the extent that they don't deserve destruction. Not that they're complete tzaddikim. That's how he understands that phrase of betoch ha'ir. But Rav Shia says something else. He says betoch ha'ir means that they are within the city, that they are involved in the city, that they are able to influence those around them. גדולה מזאת שבתו של השם בסתום בתוך העיר, הצדיק שבסתום כפי שדמותו מציירת לעיני אברהם. Hashem says, Avraham, your tzaddik, there might be tzaddikim in storm. But the tzaddik of your definition, that does not exist. What does that mean? אשר למענו ינצל ציבור החוטאים כולו. We're looking for the type of tzaddik in whose merit, again, it's not, when we say, Avraham says, save the city, save the entire city because of the tzaddikim that are inside. He doesn't mean that there is some skula. He doesn't mean there's some mystical power, the fact that you've got your, Lamed Vavdikim that are sitting somewhere and in their merit, the city is going to be saved. It's not what Avraham is asking. Avraham is saying the following. He's saying maybe there are 50 tzaddikim, but betoch ha'ir, there are people that are within the city, and even though they're all wicked now, but that influence is there, that potential is there. There are people, those tzaddikim, in whose merit they might be able to change. They might be able to tell the other people to leave their wicked ways and to act differently, the same way that's what Avraham has done in the world. Again, what Noach failed to do, and what Lot didn't even try to do. But this is what Avraham would have done, and this is what he's asking for. He says, "Mitoch ha'ir tzaddik shebestom kvi shedmuto mitzayar le'nei Avraham." Second line now of the second paragraph, towards the bottom of the page. V'asher lama'ano yinatzel tzibur hachutim kulo. Who is this tzaddik in whose merit the city will be saved? Eino mafkir et hamonim mitoch yehirut u'zchichut hadat. He doesn't say, look at them. אותו צדיק בסתום, לא באפס מעשה, יסתכל באובדנה מוסרי של בני עירו. He will not just look on with apathy at what is going on and what is happening to the rest of his city. אף אין הוא מתבודד בארבע אמותיו ואומר שלום עלי נפשי. He doesn't just sit in his ivory tower and say, I'm fine. Remember the Chatam Sofer, Machasei Amanim Avraham? It all ties together beautifully. אני את נפשי הצלתי, I'll save myself. שכן, אם כך הוא עושה, בעצם התנהגותו זו כבר הוציא את עצמו מכלל הצדיקים. Because the minute that he says, I'm fine and I'll just save myself and everybody else can, well then you're not a tzaddik. You're not the tzaddik בתוך העיר. שהרי לא יצא ידי חובה גדולה מוטלת עליו בסביבתו המיוחדת. If he's truly a tzaddik, he understands he's in that situation for a reason. ופחות מכל, ראוי הוא שלמענו ינצלו הרבים. In the merit of that type of individual, the city will be saved. And the message here is Storm was so lost that even that guy, that a few, even 10 people like that did not exist. There is, by the way, there's a beautiful interpretation. I heard this from Rabbi Sachs, in the name of Rabbi Sachs. We questioned the numbers. We went from 50 to 45 to 40 to etc. So Rashi said, when we're going down from 40 to 30 to 20, it means that there are 5 cities, I'm only looking for 10 tzaddikim in each city. Less than that's not going to be enough. So I'm asking, maybe 4 cities can be saved. Maybe 3 cities can be saved. Maybe 2 cities can be saved. So there's an alternative explanation that says, we don't go from 5 to 4 to 3 cities. The entire time, Avraham is asking for all the cities. So when he says there's 50, it means maybe there are 10 tzaddikim in each city. And when he says 45, he says maybe there are 9 tzaddikim in each city. And when he says 40, he means maybe there are 8 tzaddikim in each city. And 30 means maybe there are 6. Right? And 20 means that maybe there are 4. And 10 means maybe there are 2 tzaddikim in each city. So then, you can ask the question, why didn't he ask for 5? Why didn't he ask for 5? Maybe there's 1 tzaddik in each city and that's enough to save them. So the answer that I heard in the name of Rabbi Sachs, he said, and it ties in exactly with what Rav Hirsch says, because if you have 1 tzaddik in a city, that's not a tzaddik. If there's 1 tzaddik in a city, that's not a real tzaddik. Meaning, one person, you couldn't impact, you couldn't influence at least one other person. You're the only one. Again, you're sitting in your ivory tower. You've made no change. You've made no impact, not even one other person. So that's hopeless. So that's what Avraham, that's what he says, and that's what Avraham says here. So I think, again, going back to the question we asked, which is, what is Avraham davening for? Who is he asking for? What is he praying about? We could answer in a word that Avraham sees potential. Avraham is praying for the potential of the people of Sodom. They may be wicked now. He says, but surely there's somebody there who can help them, who can raise them up, who can bring them onto this path. Surely there are 10 tzaddikim within the city, 10, 9, 8, whatever it is. And Hashem says, no, he says, for them, the hope is lost. But Avraham refuses to give up hope. He refuses to give up hope until the point where HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodo v'atzmo says to him, in this case, there is no hope. But the message for us is storm, of course, is the exception. Storm happened once upon a time, but in our own lives, in our own world, in our own communities, never ever can we give up hope, and never ever can we give up on the potential of people. There's one more point I want to make. I know we're running out of time, but one more thing, which I saw. There's a beautiful drasha of Rabbi Lamb. By Norman Lamb. This was a drasha that was given in 1954. It's called How to Debate with God. I've brought for you some excerpts. Before we read the excerpts that are on the page, let me read to you some of the excerpts that are not here. Because he says essentially, Avraham, as we know, was not the only person to argue with God. He says, it is a popular undertaking to argue with Hashem. He says, I say it is a popular undertaking because since Avraham, men have not stopped debating with God. Moses carried out lengthy debates with God. At one point, his rebuttal became so sharp that he said, Mecheni na misifracha, erase me from your book if you will not consent to me and save Israel. Yeshayahu pictured God inviting Israel to join him in debate. L'chu na v'nivacha yomar Hashem. Yonah Navi engaged God in a protracted duel because Yonah, was worried about the safety of Israel, while God was concerned about the safety of Nineveh as well. Maybe that relates to what you asked at the beginning. The Berditchever Rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, that wonderful tzaddik of Hasidism, won a unique place in Jewish history. We all know the stories of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak arguing with God, so to speak, almost solely because of his debates with God and his intercession for Jewish sinners and his remarkable way of making them seem like saints. So we have a long tradition of the Jewish people arguing with God going back all the way to Avraham. And then says Rabbi Lamb, right, really giving rebuke here, he says, we too, of November 1954, and I add, that was November 1954. Let's think how this applies in 2026. We too debate with God. We demand a new home. We insist upon a better car. We argue for a fancier neighborhood. We eloquently engage God in debates for health and for prosperity. And if God sometimes refuses to submit to our demands, we counter with that stereotyped, hackneyed, and empty rebuttal. But I deserve it, God, after all. I'm a fellow with a good heart. I've never done anything wrong to anyone. It says Rabbi Lamb, and he's obviously being cynical here to the point. He says, we all argue with God. Look how Avraham argued, and look where we argue. That's a message here. And he says, he quotes Chazal. Chazal really say that there are two types of argument. We find Avraham, and we find in Tanakh another individual who argues with God throughout, and that is Eov, right? And he says, he quotes Chazal who say that Avraham was the example of a mature argument with God, and Eov was ultimately the immature argument. Let's read what's on the sheet in front of you, source number 8, with this we'll close off. He says, here then is the difference. Avraham debates with spiritual maturity, with spiritual ripeness. Eov debates with immaturity, is spiritually raw and underdeveloped. One's words are sour, the other's sweet. Avraham's attitude is expressed by the fact that he debates while standing before God in prayer and addressing his remarks to God, while Eov sits in his parlor and complains about God to some friends. In other words, Avraham doesn't come up and say, God, what are you doing? He says, I'm coming from a place, remember, Anochi afar va'efer. It's not by coincidence. The Netziv as well is a beautiful explanation. You can see it afterwards on the sheet of what those words, Anochi afar va'efer, mean. Avraham comes from a place of humility, from a place of submission, from a place of, God, I know that you are the master of the world. I know you are the God of Tzedek and Mishpat. Therefore, I don't understand what you are doing and how this could be. Whereas Eov comes from a different place entirely. He says, yeah, there are two ways of debating with God. You can debate like Eov or like an Avraham. And Avraham will ask his questions and think carefully. He might assume there are those who dedicate their lives to such problems and ask guidance. He will offer the challenge in a polite, humble, and intelligent way. Skipping. But a Neov type does nothing of the sort. He tells the rabbi off and he snubs God. He measures religion, the worship of God, by his own standards of what is right and what is not right. Avraham, the sweet and mature debater, might have lost the debate. Sodom was destroyed and is desolate to this very day. But he won the other world. He emerged unscathed, a glorious loser. The biblical passage ends with the words, Avraham shavlim komo. Avraham returned to his place. Not one chip was there in his spiritual stature. He was as great and as holy as before, although he lost the debate. When we debate with God, as we may, let us do so with mellowness, understanding, and maturity. And in the synagogue, lifnei Hashem. Let us not do so with the sourness and irreverence and smugness and impudence. Better let us lose like Avraham than win like Eov. So that is the message that we take. We understand what Avraham was debating about. It's all about potential. It's all about seeing the ability to influence others. It's all about bringing out that greater potential in the world. And the message, ultimately, the takeaway for us, is that was the first debate. That was how Avraham argued with God. And since then, the Jewish people, as you may have noticed, have never, ever stopped arguing with God and with others as well. But that is the way, and that is what Rabbi Avraham is telling us. Let us learn from Avraham, from Anochi Afar Va'efer. What is the mindset? What is the starting place? What is the framework from which we are coming? And in that way, we can, how does he say it? We can ultimately, even if we lose the argument, but we emerge winners ultimately.